Vine was sitting in a fancy restaurant with her fiancé, Mark. She hated being here with him and being engaged to him in general. She asked her father many times to break the engagement, but she was yelled at every time and told that it was for her own good. She knew better than to believe that. She suspected her dad had dealing with Mark in secret. Mark was an influential man in the mafia. He owned connections and a huge part of the underground world. He was arrogant, rude, manipulative, and violent. One hated every moment she spent with him. She could never tell him what was on her mind. He always expected her to never speak back to him, and he was really strict about what she could wear. She was wearing a dress he chose that evening, a revealing dress she was extremely uncomfortable in. Mark, once we are done here, you are coming with me to hotel. Juan was taken aback. He had never asked her for that before. She shivered, thinking what he'd do to her if they were alone. Juan, I'm sorry. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. She looked at his expression, and sure enough, he was furious. Mark, you don't get to decide if you're ready or not. You do as I say. Or do you want me to call your dear father? Juan was terrified, being born in a kind of family where men dominated. Women had no say in there. They had no rights to speak or choose for themselves. Juan, I'm really sorry. She didn't want to do this, but she didn't have any other choice. Juan, we can go if that's what pleases you. Mark smiled, being really satisfied with that answer, and took her to his car, telling his driver to take them to the hotel where he made a reservation for the night. Vine was feeling extremely uncomfortable, tears starting to form in her eyes at the fear of what's coming tonight. She felt him touching her thigh, and when she looked, he was grinning at her. It made her shiver. She hated everything about this. She didn't want to go with him. She wanted to go back home. She felt him getting closer to her, and his smell disgusted her. Soon enough, she felt one of his hands wrapped around her. She couldn't take it anymore and pushed him, then moved further away from him as her body shook with fear and disgust. When she looked at him, however, he wasn't angry like he was in the restaurant. Instead, he was smiling dubiously at her. It unsettled her. Mark, you will regret this wine. I'll make sure of it, he said, smiling. Wine, I'm sorry. Please don't hurt my dad. She was fighting back tears. Mark, your father will be fine. He paid me a lot to have you tonight. He chuckled. She frowned, more of shock to hear that. She knew that kind of family she was born in. But do they now sell their daughters to rich snobs? They soon arrived at the hotel and he took her to one of the rooms. The room was spacious and the bed was large. It felt so excessive to her, even if she was from a wealthy family. He forced himself on her that night. She tried her best not to fight back or cry, but a lot of tears escaped her eyes that night. A few days had passed since that night. Vine locked herself in her room and refused to leave the entire time, which made her dad angry, but he didn't argue with her too much. She was lying on her bed looking at the old pictures on her phone. She noticed that she took less and less pictures as years passed. She kept scrolling down until she reached pictures she took as a teenager. In almost all of them was her childhood friend, Jungkook. They looked so happy together. She teared up remembering all the good times they had. Jungkook was also a part of the mafia, which was why they attended the same school. She always wondered why her father desperately tried to please other members of the mafia when he was part of the family himself. She wondered why she and Jungkook stopped talking and remembered that Jungkook had to go to Russia to handle the South Korean mafia business there and they didn't talk ever since. She was deep in thought when she got a message from her fiancé. He was asking her to go out with him tonight too. But after what happened last time, she wanted to make any excuse to not go with him. She immediately left the house before her fiancé could talk to her dad, telling her dad she's going out with her friends. She got in her car and started driving around the city. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to leave the house or her dad would force her to meet her with her fiancé again. She ignored her fiance's messages and her dad calls until so late into the night. She saw that a car was blocking her path and it made her so confused. Then suddenly, a row of black cars were surrounded hers, their headlights suddenly turning on, and it was almost blinding to her for a moment. She then saw men dressed up in black and holding guns forming up around her car. She realized she was in deep trouble. Man, step out of the car. You're in our territory, he said and pointed his gun at her. She was terrified, her hands shaking violently. As she raised them, surrendering, indicating that she meant no harm. Why? Escaping one trouble had to get her into a bigger one. Wine. I mean no harm. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was your territory. I'll leave. Tears welled up in her eyes and a cry escaped her lips, when none of them seemed to buy her innocence. Man, we'll see if you're a spy or not. For now, you're coming with us. He stepped forward, but she screamed and stepped back. The flashback of Mark touching her forcefully appeared in front of her, and suddenly she wanted to throw out. She noticed the door of the car opening and a familiar looking man stepping out of it, approaching her and the man. As he got closer, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was Jungkook. Wine. Jungkook? She took a second and her eyes widened up as she rushed to him and hugged him tightly. He raised his hand as a sign to his men to put their guns down. Jungkook, it's okay. I got you. No one is going to hurt you at my watch. Wine. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to stay here. She cried as she repeated over and over again. Jungkook wondered what was making her so scared. He wrapped his arm around her and helped her sit in the car while she kept holding him tightly. Jungkook, what is happening, Wine? Wine, I just got so scared because of all those men and guns. Jungkook, no, that's not it. He held her cheeks and made her look up at him. And sworn in those eyes, he saw the fear that sent shivers down his spine. They were so dull, she looked so weak, and as if she lost all of her colors. He returned to Korea to make her his. All those years, he worked hard day and night to reach a point where he'll be able to take her back with him without anyone daring to blink at him. Jungkook, I'm here. Wine, I got you. No one, and I mean absolutely no one in this entire universe, is going to lay his finger on you. So please tell me what's going on. Otherwise, I have other ways to out information. Wine, Dad, he got me engaged to Mark forcefully. He's violent and abusive. He even raped me and now he wanted more so I ran away. He was not the goofy and cute Jungkook she grew up with. He was different. His body had gotten so broad and muscular to crush a skull with bare hands. He held the authority and dominance in his aura which could make anyone dig their own graves. And those eyes were dark but provided such warmth and protection to her. Wine, I missed you. He hugged him again and he closed his eyes to remain calm and not hurt her in process. Jungkook, consider yourself free. Mark, or your father won't be able to step near you, even over my dead body. Wine, do you mean it? Jungkook, I came back here with only one purpose. That is to make you mine. What was it that she felt? Her heartbeat got high, and instead of fear like she felt with Mark, she felt protected. Something she wanted to be true instead of just being said in a few words. Jungkook, so after I'm done with your family, I'm taking you back with me. Do you want to be mine, Wine? She hit his chest and she pulled away. A tear escaped her eyes. Wine, you left and never came back. Do you know how much I waited for you? He smiled, a smile after so many years of separation and torturous training. He wondered how much this girl had an effect on him. Jungkook, I came back for you, Wine. Only for you. She cried and he kissed her forehead. The anger in him for what she went through was for her to see. But in that moment, he found her so adorable, yearning for him and only him. He kissed her forehead and wiped her tears. She noticed that he was driving in her direction of the home. Once they reached there, inside, she saw her dad and her fiancé waiting for her with a furious look on their faces. Although, when they saw Jungkook, it was a surprise to them. They knew he was back in South Korea, but they didn't understand why he was with her. Mark, what's happening here? He looked at her dad, John. John, Jungkook, how are you here? Jungkook's eyes shifted from her father to her ex fiancé. The fire in his eyes grew to burn him alive, and he was definitely going to do just that very soon. Jungkook, the only reason I am here, to let you both know, I'm taking Wyan with me, and if any of you got a problem, I declare a war. Mark owned South Korea. He was in a position where everyone feared him, included John. But Jungkook, he owned Russia and Korea. Mark knew so well he stood no chance before him. Mark, do you think you can step out of here unharmed, John? Jungkook, whatever you have up your sleeve, do it fast. I'm a busy man, Mark. He tilted his head. None of the men pointed their guns at him, since Jungkook's men took care of everything silently. No one moved, and it only brought a more smirk on his face. Jungkook, let's go. Taking her hand, he stepped out of there as unharmed as he stepped inside an enemy's territory. Jungkook, you're mine to keep.